Welcome to Hit Enter. In this new episode, I'm talking with Steijn Pelle of Fitmo, who developed a fitness app to bring the personal trainer to the masses, about health tech in general, and about how corporates and governmental organizations like Startup Delta can do to advance innovation in an area where it's needed most, healthcare. Hi Steijn, it's great you could make it.
Thanks for having me, Samir.
Steijn, one of the quotes on your testimonials actually on your website is that a person says, "Thank you Fitmo, because of you I found a coach who kicks me in the butt." And I was wondering, do people actually need a kick in the butt to exercise?
Well, I think that's the good thing about what we've made. It's a marketplace. So we don't push, let's say, a specific methodology of coaches that need to kick your butt. Some people need that. Like me, for example.
Okay.
But other people, they would like to have more of a positive, motivational kind of coaching. And I think that's fine with us. We are a marketplace and we make sure that the quality of the trainers in there is good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's up to the person that you picked or the coach that you picked that you're going to train with.
Okay, so how many push-ups did you do today yourself?
Well, I was in the Vondel Park at 7 a.m. at the morning.
Wow.
And I already did a workout. So
With Fitmo.
Exactly, yeah, I have
Okay.
a trainer in Dallas actually.
A trainer in
Mitch,
Dallas.
he's a very nice guy.
Okay. So you have your trainer in Dallas. How did you pick him? Because that's one of the issues you need to do on your platform.
Yeah, I think it's also one of the things that we spent the most time on the last months in getting that right and finding that out how actually people would like to pick a coach. And I think how it works right now is if you download the app, you first start with your health goal. So basically you say, I want to run 5 kilometers or I want to lose some weight. And what we do right then is we make a selection of a couple of trainers that fit that goal basically. And then you check out their profile and their reviews. And based on that you can start a trial with that person. So that's how we do that right now. So it's health goal oriented most of the times. And we curate also for you. So we started with, you need to have a long list of a lot of trainers, right?
Yes.
But it's very difficult for a person to pick a coach themselves. And people trust Fitmo that we select the right people for you and you can make the final call or the final decision there.
And how does that go about? How do you select the right person?
You mean as a client or as a coach?
Because you just said that you curate the coaches for the people on the platform. How do you do that?
I see that also as one of our most important roles. Is if you trust Fitmo or you download our app, you have to be sure that the person that you start to train with is a good person or is a right person. And we have a coach director in our team, Jody. She's working out of Los Angeles actually. She is a personal trainer herself, and she's, I think, every day working with coaches to see if they fit the profile first. So she does the whole acquisition of new coaches, checks their certifications, checks their testimonials and all that kind of things. So that's one thing, is we spend a lot of time in finding the right coaches and only allow a couple of trainers in our platform if they really meet our standards. And the second thing, it's the same how another marketplace like Airbnb works. It's all online, so you can basically see how fast a coach responds to a client. And we intervene at the moment that things going wrong there.
So with Fitmo, you're bringing actually the luxury of having a personal trainer, which I think is really nice, to the masses.
Yeah.
How do you scale such a platform?
I think it's a very good question. It's obvious for a client why you should choose Fitmo, right? I mean, you get the luxury of a personal trainer from €8 on monthly. So I think that's pretty clear that you can have one-on-one training every day. And for coaches, and we see that's also very profitable because it's the same like, again, with another marketplace like Uber, for example. In the beginning, they use private drivers. And in their downtime, so next to their existing business, they could get extra clients thanks to the Uber app. And we see the same. So we have very good personal trainers that have their own client base. But next to that, in their downtime, they train extra people thanks to us. And they can help up to 100 people at the moment in their downtime. So
to me, that seems quite challenging for a trainer.
It's super challenging.
Serve 100 people.
Yeah, I think that's
at distance.
For sure. I think that's also where our second priority is with Fitmo. So one is make sure that we only have the best people in the platform in the world. And the second thing what we should do is give coaches tools to enable them to train people online. So Fitmo was not only a marketplace, like, you know, download the app, pick Mitch in Dallas, and then you start training with him in the park, because that's not scalable, right? Because Mark or Mitch still needs to train quite a lot of people to make a living out of it. But we organize that completely online. So we give coaches tools. For example, they can build workouts very easily, and they can reuse the same workouts for different clients and tailor them to their own needs. So we have a workout player. That's one of the things that we build for coaches, and saves them a lot of time. And along those lines, we have a couple of extra tools, and I think that's also on the roadmap to expand that toolkit for a trainer, so he can probably train up to 150 people in his or her downtime.
You just said that Fitmo brings luxury of a trainer to you as a person. How do you convince the not so tech savvy person to use Fitmo? It's quite a difference to use an app instead of a person.
Well,
or use.
Yeah, good question. I think we are not aiming on replacing a real personal trainer. I mean, if you can afford it, I would always recommend you to be in the park or in the gym with a real person. I mean, also having a person in person with you, that's at the end the best solution.
Exactly.
The simple thing is, only 1% of the people in the world can afford such a service. And the thing what we try to do is make such a service affordable for a lot of people. So if you compare our service, where you can interact with a trainer every day who builds your workouts, that's much better than a generic app that you have out there in the market right now, or only a wearable device that tracks your step and does do nothing with that besides that. An algorithm probably is recommending you some stuff. We think it's very difficult to replace an algorithm with a real human being. So we are not aiming on replacing a real personal trainer. We only try to make that service affordable for a lot of people in the world.
And can you delve a bit more into what you bring to the table with Fitmo in a very crowded fitness app market?
Absolutely. I think there are tens of health apps out there in the market right now. You have probably hundreds of wearable devices, and still wearable devices are being funded at the moment. Millions of people go to a gym. And that's also why we started Fitmo, because despite all that things, still a lot of people struggle to get into shape or reach a health goal. And that's also the basic, I think the philosophy behind Fitmo, is that it is not an algorithm that's going to change your behavior. We think that's another human being that helps you to change your behavior, that is the only thing that works. And that's the basic philosophy behind Fitmo, to make a person available for you on a daily basis.
To your point, there are some tech trends right now in the world: AI, machine learning, self-driving cars, and you see, as with Uber, the idea is that in the next 10, 20 years, or maybe even later, the drivers will be replaced by self-driving cars. So I was wondering, how would that influence Fitmo? Will we see the trainers also disappear with artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Well, what I learned, I think, by being an entrepreneur already for a couple of years, is that you have to think step by step these days, because things are changing so rapidly. And I think what we are focused on right now is more or less the LinkedIn strategy, or the Reid Hoffman strategy, as I like to call that. And that's the basic philosophy behind LinkedIn, is, you know, not how we can replace a recruiter, for example, but how can we make his or her job significantly more easy. And I think that's also where we need at least a couple of years to make that happen, is to make a service like this available for millions of people. And I think that's how far I can make a prediction, I would say, or I can get a prediction in the future. That I think I see that is happening, that you can get online access to people. But the next step, I honestly don't know. Our space, the healthcare and wellness, there's so much going on right now, and there is not one clear path right now that we see that's how it's going to be, let's say, in the coming 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. To your point, let's talk about the broader health space. Health is quite an issue right now, and it will become an even more important issue in the future. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how the technology is, because there is a lot of technology available right now. Is it really used? And what's your take also on the Dutch startup ecosystem? Are there enough startups focusing on health?
Yeah, I would say first of all, keep in mind that healthcare is super complex because it's not like ordering a pizza, which is also super difficult to build and scale that online, by the way. But when you order a pizza, there is not a lot of regulation besides the fact that the pizza should be good, right? And in healthcare, there's a lot of more regulation going on. So bringing doctors online, for example, is something that is super difficult. I think also one of the reasons why we did not start in health specifically, but why we started with Fitmo in wellness, because there is not that much regulation going on. So we can collect a lot of learnings and lessons in how to connect people online to a professional. But later on, it's definitely the plan to probably broaden our marketplace, and why not get access to a physical therapist, for example, or even a doctor in some scenarios. That is definitely on our roadmap to test with that in the coming 5 years. So one is that it's very difficult to innovate in there.
But it's an industry ripe for innovation.
Yes.
And there are, at the one hand, for example, you just talked about the regulations, which is difficult in almost any country around the world. But on the other hand, you have initiatives like Startup Delta and others in the Dutch government. I know, as a matter of fact, that they're really pushing the envelope on getting innovation done, especially by startups. But how could an organization like Startup Delta help to get us innovation in one of the places where it's most needed, healthcare?
The moment is now. Because you see that startups in the Netherlands, for example, doing very good, like My Tomorrows is a nice example of that. You see Rockstart Health. I think the batch will start next month. Super interesting. So I think there are a lot of great initiatives, and for example, Startup Delta should definitely support that kind of initiatives like Rockstart Health, and also help to change the mindset that we should try to change things. And again, we can go back to a topic that I think is already widely covered. I think it's culture. Even in healthcare, we should accept the fact that we're gonna try things and that we will fail. Also with Fitmo. Probably we will not figure it out before money is on the bank. That could be a case. But we have a lot of lessons learned there in that case. I think we will make it, obviously, but that could happen. It also is going to happen if we scale this, that there will be bad trainers on our platform, and we will kick them out, and we will try to do everything what we can for that client. But it's going to happen. In healthcare, it's definitely going to happen that if doctors get access online to photos of treatments, of diagnosis of patients from all around the world, that there will be security breaches in that. But there is a big advantage of sharing, a treatment with a doctor in Malaysia, which is possible thanks to a startup in America. And I think where Startup Delta can help to cut that short is to change that mindset and to make also the healthcare industry ripe for innovation.
Well, you talked you just said that it's a cultural issue. I agree on that point, but it's also an issue of allocating risk, and you see that especially with regards to health and also governmental issues. It's quite an issue for a lot of stakeholders involved. Nobody dares to take the risk. So how do you think we could go about in getting that removed? Because I think that would be really very important.
I posted already also a comment, it's related to this, on an article. It was spread about big companies start to spend money on startups. I think you covered that as well on StartupJuncture. And my comment on that is be very careful with that before we get a next wave of disappointment about startups in the Netherlands. Because my only solution, and then specifically for health as well, is we should have a bunch of crazy people, a programmer, a crazy hustler, we call the CEO, and a couple of other people who's sitting in an office like this and are backed by a couple of crazy and experienced investors who are going to help to figure out what's the solution for, in this case, a health problem. And I think that's the only way forward, that startups, startup teams, venture-backed, are going to try new things in close collaboration depends on what you do, right? With hospitals or with individual doctors or with people that supply you with medicines and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that model works in the United States at the moment. I think Oscar, a health insurance company, is a great example of that. A couple of very smart people, I think ex-Google, venture-backed by very experienced guys who help to scale. I think that's the way forward.
You made actually a quite interesting side note just a moment ago about
Mm-hmm.
the next wave of disappointment.
Yeah.
To paraphrase you, can you elaborate a bit on that? Because you're talking about corporates investing a lot of money in startups.
Yeah.
So why would that be a disappointment?
Well, it comes down to a nice blog that I read from Brian Chesky from Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a blog, "Don't Fuck Up the Culture," was the title of that blog. And
Great title.
Exactly, it's made to stick, right? So I started to read that article. And they just closed a new funding round, and they sat down with Peter Thiel, and Brian asked Peter Thiel, what's the next thing that I should do, or what's the biggest hurdle that you see for scaling my company to the next level?
Yes.
And Peter Thiel made the famous comment, "Don't fuck up the culture."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you can change a lot of things, but you cannot change the culture anymore. So I think what he meant by that, and I completely agree, that if you want to innovate and build up a company like Airbnb, in this case in the health space, the culture should be right. And we talked already a bit about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people that are willing to try a lot, fail, and that's where, let's say, the next wave of disappointment comes in. Is that if bigger companies in the Netherlands think that they can set up a startup.
Well, we can talk about a wave of disappointment, but there's also a wave of, for the audience maybe, a wave of investment from corporate companies.
Yeah.
So Eneco, for example,
and that's again cultural related.
Yeah,
because you should expect that in a board meeting, for example,
mm-hmm.
we talk about different things. I studied business administration and did consultancy for bigger companies.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends who sold their company to a bigger corporation, for
mm-hmm.
example. And they all struggle, and that's okay, because an institution works differently in checks and balances than a startup. The only thing that I say here is if you are the CFO of KPN, for example, who used to be an entrepreneur, right, Jan Kees de Jager, think twice before you set up startups yourself. And I also gave a solution, I think, based on that next wave of disappointment. Because I think if you do that, you get disappointed, right? And all the companies get disappointed because they come into meetings and that doesn't work, because there's me as the startup founder who has the philosophy of jumping out of an airplane and unfold my parachute on my way down, right?
Exactly.
Also what Reid Hoffman said, that's running a startup. Of course, with checks and balances and with smart people that can, guide you into the right direction. Because it is a science and a process as
mm-hmm.
running a startup right
mm-hmm.
now. But that's completely different than the discussions that you have in the boardroom with KPN, and that's fine. So what I think,
to your point, Eneco announced that they are going to invest 100 million just this year. KPN, they announced that they are going to invest 25 million. And your point is about disappointment. Can you maybe in a punchline say why doesn't it work? Apparently, because it seems a natural fit. Corporates have all the resources, the supply and marketing channels needed for startups. Startups have the agility to come up with great ideas and mm-hmm. build on it very fast. But somehow it doesn't work, and I think you're exactly pointing to that disappointment.
Yes.
So both of them, they want to work, but they can't. So why is that?
Because as a startup and as a corporate as well, you don't need money, you need smart money. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So I need an investor that scaled a startup before and knows how you go through the stages from an idea to an MVP, from an MVP to a product market fit, from a product market fit to a growth stage. Mm-hmm. And then, if needed, follow up funding rounds and scaling your organization internationally or whatever in a vertical. That is a completely different way than I was taught at the business school in Rotterdam, which is managing a company. Exactly. So you found out how to do things and you copy-paste it. and obviously incrementally you improve things, but it's completely different than guiding a startup with a completely new proposition internationally. Who I need is Brian Chesky,
Exactly.
who had a marketplace in temporary housing and now helps me with doing the same in the health industry. So I think
in Europe,
there is going to be the disappointment for both the startup.
In your opinion, corporates shouldn't try to build something themselves, and they shouldn't get too involved in building the product and entering the market, but be a lay-back investor maybe.
No, my solution
that would be the approach.
Is also not so. I would probably sometimes it works because that's one side comment is why does it work at Apple or Google? Because the VP that you're dealing with, the vice president that guides your acquisition or is investing in your startup, is a former entrepreneur himself.
Yes.
And he is in the culture of making mistakes and failures and all that kind of stuff. So
even the VC industry works better because the VCs are former entrepreneurs themselves.
That's my belief.
Yeah.
Always an exception.
Mine too. Yeah.
Because you can. There's never a generic. Let's say.
Of course.
This is not my advice. Like, don't do this. And therefore, what I would recommend a corporate to do is not start a startup. Also, not invest early stage in a startup. Probably even acquire a startup. But what I would do is the same what American Express did with Stripe. They participated in a later round, so not in the seed funding stage or in the Series A stage, where you still need to figure out that product market fit. Really, in Series D or E, where you should scale that company internationally. And I think that's an interesting perspective, and it also is an interesting investment for a financial services company like American Express.
Let's talk about Fitmo itself. You raised in the last year or so, you raised 1.2 million euros, and you actually onboarded new investors. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
One of the people that joined is Peter Driesen from Spill Games, the founder, and we specifically like the fact that he has a lot of experience and lessons learned as well in how to scale up an internet company globally. And we are almost, I think, found our product market fit. So the next stage for us in the coming 12 months is try to scale the product market fit so we can raise preferably a Series A in America. And therefore the knowledge, the experience, the network of Peter is super valuable for us. So that's why we started to work together with him.
And Peter is one of the co-founders of Spill Games, which is quite a successful gaming company.
Exactly. So it was, I think, in the heydays, which was in the beginning of the internet, like the early 20s. It was an online gaming company, which had more than 280 million visitors monthly, actively, on mainly, let's say, platforms like Spelletje.nl, for example, where people could play in the browser a game.
And how much did you raise from Peter?
We do not disclose that amount.
Okay, so maybe you can disclose how much you would like to raise for your Series A round in the United States.
Well, we still figured it out. I think the focus for now is really on making that model work. And I think based on how that evolves, we have a clear metrics in mind, which I think is also not fair to share publicly because we want to keep that with the team right now. Also because it's very volatile in a startup, right? So you change a lot of things. So at the moment you say a number or say a thing, that doesn't make sense.
But your seed round is quite large comparatively, especially for the Netherlands, maybe not the United States.
Yeah. Also because, again, we talked about this before. Sorry to interrupt you, by the way, but
no problem.
It's a marketplace plus platform.
Yes.
And that means it's a trend. So we see more startups. There is a big event organizing B2B startup, forgot the name. Which does the same. So you find, let's say, an event organizer and then facilitate the relationship with that event organizer.
Would that be live on demand or it's another platform?
No, it's another platform.
Okay.
And I think you shouldn't forget operationally how much time it costs to come up with an MVP there. And we try to keep it super focused, right? So you can always say, why don't you start more easy? But I think if you want to add more value in this industry, you need partly a marketplace and partly a platform where you can train a person.
Yeah, and then probably you need somewhere around 5 million euros as a Series A round?
I think that's the target, but again, it also could be another amount of money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And what are you going to, last point, what are you going to use that money for?
Yeah, again, we can talk about the capital deployment right now, but we have no clue, honestly, Samir. I mean, there are generic ideas, but again, we are really focused right now on making the model work, reaching Series A metrics, because we aren't there yet. And if we have reached that point, then the next step is think about, how much money do we need to scale this, in which way, and which investors fit the profile. Already a lot of funds reached out to us, obviously, but it's still too early for us.
Obviously?
Because...
Why? Obviously?
Oh, yeah, well, I didn't mean it like that.
Okay.
But, well, it's an interesting proposition.
You could have oversubscription, of course, on your... That happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Not a lot of times, but it happens sometimes. But
that's true.
That's not the case in your case?
No.
Not right now. Okay.
No.
Okay, just to get it very specific, you're going to use the money for attracting developers, designers, or are you going to use it to expand internationally, maybe? Can we expect Fitmo, for example, in the United States? Are
we talking about
the Series A round you're going to raise?
Well, that's definitely going to be used for expansion.
For expansion.
And as far as we see it right now,
which top 3 countries are you focusing on?
At the moment, I think 60% of the downloads is generated in the States.
Okay.
But we haven't decided yet.
You haven't decided
No.
yet? Okay. Okay, Steijn, it was a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.